Carolyn MacKenzie is a board certified health physicist and consultant in radiation protection. She previously led efforts with the University of California system-wide to replace potential dangerous cesium irradiators with alternative technologies. Carolyn has served as the Radiation Safety Officer for both UC Berkeley and UC Davis, as well as worked for Lawrence Livermore National Lab and the National Nuclear Security Administration in radiation protection and international radioactive source security. In 2004 to 2007, Carolyn led efforts for the International Atomic Energy Agency in radioactive source search and to secure lost radioactive sources. She has previously trained comprehensive test ban treaty inspectors, international journalists, IAEA inspectors, government officials, teachers, students, and other diverse audiences in radiation protection and global radioactive source security. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Carolyn MacKenzie. Yay!
Thank you so much for having me. That's a real honor to be here, and I'm pleased to get to see these familiar faces and unfamiliar faces. So thank you. Like Brandy just said, I am retired now, although I am still consulting to NNSA, and so I'm still dabbling, and I'm definitely still active in the American Academy of Health Physics. So, but I try to play more, a whole lot more. I really am camping a lot and traveling more when I can, and playing. But I have had some very interesting jobs over the years, and so I wanted to highlight a few of them that I know are maybe of interest. As in particular, some of the international work. So I have some slides. All right. So this is not all the things, but these are some of the themes that the theme has been protecting people against particularly dangerous sources, not small sources, but big sources of radioactive material that are potentially dangerous. And the focus has been global. It started actually with my work in Russia with radiological thermal generators, and we'll talk about that, which are these huge radioactive sources that we replaced along the Arctic Circle with solar. And that sort of then sprouted into looking for what we call orphan sources or lost sources of large lost sources of radioactive materials. And then even Brandy helped me with doing some training, international training on radiological emergencies. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And you know what, Brandy, that's getting interest again because of the war with Ukraine. A lot of people have been internationally reaching out and wanting more training on that topic. I'm sorry to say, right? And then last but not least, there was an effort in California to replace large cesium irradiators that are potentially dangerous as well. And we've made progress in that. So this is what I thought I'd highlight, and some fun international pictures as well. These are radiological thermal generators. They look a little odd. They're probably about 6 feet tall at most, or 5 feet, and they look like a big fat drum with sort of fins around them. And they're very, very large sources of strontium-90 typically, but some are plutonium-238. And they're very large, and they are so large they generate heat. There's so much radioactivity there, it generates heat, and that heat is converted to electricity, and they powered lighthouses all along the Arctic Circle. If you saw the movie The Martian, they're also used in space because they can generate electricity, and so they're of use in space. In situations where you need a power source, but there's hard to have any kind of generator there, these RTGs are very effective. The only problem with these RTGs is that they also are potentially quite an effective, what we call dirty bomb. A material that if you exploded it with explosives around it, it could disperse and be very dangerous to a large amount of people. So the U.S. tackled a project that started in early 2000s, 2000, and just last year completely finished with Russia, believe it or not, before the Ukraine war, to replace about 1,100 RTGs along the Arctic Circle with solar. And I got involved in that project. And it was fascinating. Got to travel with the Russian military, of all people, right? 10 captains and 1 general. And there were 3 Americans, and I was the only woman on the group. And we spent 3 weeks hunting down remote RTGs and trying to do reconnaissance to figure out how to get them out. And did it along Kamchatka, which is, okay, you know where Alaska is. When you look out into Russia, that's Kamchatka off the Aleutian Islands, and past that is the Russian side, and Siberia and Kamchatka. And it's just a spectacular area. Very smoky volcanoes and grizzly bears and Kodiaks and really, really very wild area, not a tourist area in any way, shape, or form. And we're traveling on ice cutters and helicopters with the military, and it was just a fascinating project. And it's now completed, which is pretty amazing. So most of the RTGs in this world have now been taken out. Most of them, I don't know if all of them are out, but most all of them are. And they're being dismantled. And there's not a whole lot you can do with them, but obviously, but you can bury the material, and that's in deep in the earth, and that's actually what's happening with most of them in Russia.
Carolyn, were you involved with that project all 21 years, or just?
No. I was just involved with it in the early days. So Lawrence Livermore Lab had the project to work it, and I got asked to go to Russia and work with them for a while. And so I worked it in 2002, 3, and 4, and then the word got out on the street that I was doing this unusual work, right? Russia, and I got a call from the International Atomic Energy Agency. It was one of the easiest jobs I've ever had in my life. They found me. I didn't find them. They asked me if I would come help them in Vienna and to head up a project to locate lost large sources around the world. And so in 2004, I moved to Vienna and did that. And we started with the Soviet Union countries because they were the countries that had the most radioactive material. They had the most sources around the world. And then we moved on to the war-torn countries like Bosnia and Serbia and Macedonia and Albania, and which had just sources scattered as well. And then China, and then Africa. And I moved back to the U.S. and then was asked by the National Nuclear Security Administration to do this work, focusing on Africa out of the U.S. So from 2008 to 2012, until I came over to Berkeley, I was working securing sources in Africa.
And Carolyn, did you find one region was more difficult to work in than the others?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, China was one of the easier areas to work in. They are so industrious. I would present a small idea and they'd run with it, and but in Africa, it took a lot of effort to get work going. And so that was harder. Each region was different. Like in the Balkans, they needed, I asked them, what do you need to make this work happen? And they said, we need gas money. Well, we don't have money for gas to drive around the country to do this work. And I said, okay, I'll pay for your gas, right? So absolutely, each region was unique. And you had to understand the cultural issues, in each one in order to work there. So very unique. But the problem is lost sources and the potential that they can be turned into dirty bombs. And so the effort was by the US and by the International Atomic Energy Agency, was to locate these and to get them secure. And get them off the streets, get them back to their country of origin, get them disposed if there's a disposal pathway, or get them secured so they can't be ripped off. So we weren't looking for little stuff, we were looking for big stuff. Okay, we had to literally step over the little stuff because there's too much out there. You had to focus on the really big sources. You had to help countries get an inventory of what they even had, especially the war-torn countries. They didn't even know what they had. And the former Soviet countries, the records had stayed in Moscow, and so they were so absorbed with setting up their countries that they didn't have many of the sources were simply lost. So we had to go back to go and try and find them and establish an inventory. Establish security systems, prevent theft, and then train. There's one of these, right? So the goal was to empower people to do this work. So to train them how, get them equipment, and let them do this work. And they know their country a lot better than I do. So I thought you'd like to see some fun pictures of what we found, right? There's a whole series there of boxes that actually had teletherapy sources, which were very large sources. They're used in medicine to treat at hospitals treating cancer. And there's a whole series of them there in just a yard in the middle of nowhere. This was a whole warehouse of sources that I found in Nigeria. And there were just box after box after box of sources and gauges for in setting up a gas plant. And that were just some of them had been stolen. It was a mess, just a mess. There's a bunch of big sources in the Congo. And Republic of Congo and Democratic Republic of Congo, both countries had just a mess. So it's not that the countries in Africa had that many sources, but what they had was very vulnerable. It had no security, no nothing. It was just sort of in old abandoned buildings. And here's a whole series of them. One of the uses of these sources overseas is tsetse fly irradiators. So they in Africa and in Indonesia, they irradiate tsetse flies and sterilize the males and then re-release them and try to phase out tsetse flies. And it's a very effective strategy for problem insects. And but these irradiators that they use to sterilize, I found them. They're very large cesium sources, and I had to go locate them and try and replace them with X-ray units instead of the sources. And those were a number of them that I found in Mauritius and in Kenya and up in Tunisia, a variety of countries. And then we put on training, like I say, there's one of me, right? And so my goal was to train other people how to do this and give them equipment, train them how to use the equipment, and give them gas money, figure out what is the stumbling block to get you so you can do this, and then help them go, see if they'll go do it. And, countries really vary. In China, this was so effective. They had a big earthquake. Within a year of me training a number of their search team leaders, what we call them, from each province, and they all went and they had all these collapsed buildings with sources and they were effective at locating sources. They found all kinds of sources. So that was exciting. That was nice to see that the work actually happened and worked out well. Sometimes it didn't work out well. Sometimes they found sources and were frightened and ran away. Literally, I had people tell me that they ran away, and I had to say, "Okay, no, we need to go back and deal with this now." And these are the kinds of equipment that we gave them and trained them how to use to locate the materials. And then we'd fix up the storage places. Like this is a picture of a before and an after on a storage facility that was just a disaster zone. And we cleaned it up, secured it, and got the sources at least temporarily stored there. So that's sort of about the orphan source work. But what goes hand in hand with this kind of work is teaching people about radiation and what's how do you respond to a radiation emergency, whether it's a Fukushima nuclear reactor type or a dirty bomb or a nuclear weapon. So I've been involved in training people around the world on this kind of topic, and in particular journalists, so that we get better reporting, so that they can accurately report. And this is what actually Brandy was involved in, helping me. She did these graphics for us in designing what do you do? And I'm getting a lot of these questions right now with the Ukraine and with Putin threatening to use nuclear weapons. People want to know, what do you do? Well, you get inside, you get clean, you take off any potentially contaminated clothing, and you get informed. You stay inside, and you stay inside for at least 24 hours if it's a potential nuclear weapon. And so we've had this way of trying to come up with easy ways to communicate this information nationally and internationally to people with symbols, and with translating this diagram. And then that sort of brings me to California. So in California, we have, all over the U.S., we have about 700 or 800 now of these cesium irradiators, these large radioactive sources that are used in medicine and research for good causes. But they have a real problem in that the material is large and it's a powder and easily dispersible. And there's alternative technologies now that can be used to replace them, like X-ray machines can actually do, in most cases, similar work. So we've been trying to phase these out. Well, California has over 100 of them. And about half of those, about 50 of those, were with the University of California. And so people sort of heard that, knew that I worked at Berkeley now, but they knew my past had been doing this kind of work. And so I got asked to help the Office of the President at UC come over and work with our researchers to replace these units with X-ray. And gosh, we've replaced about 28 of them out of the 50, or so. And so we're making progress. It's a process, and COVID stopped everything for a while. We had an accident with one of these up at the University of Washington, and that stopped all the work for quite a while. But this is right down the street from you all. This is Children's Hospital. And this is a blood irradiator, and that blood irradiator is cesium, and we removed it. So on the left is the cesium irradiator, and that got removed and put in this huge cast and shipped off one day. Actually, late at night, and you all were probably in bed. But that's it, and that's the source on the left. And so after they took out the casing, then they pulled it out and then used a crane to get it in this large cast and get it shipped off. So it's right in the backyard. So these are interesting jobs, right? I mean, they're unusual jobs, and they're unique. I definitely, spent a lot of time traveling all over the world doing this kind of work internationally and nationally, and developed some rules of the road that I always like to share with audiences, especially audiences that also do international work. So I've been in almost 85 countries to date. It's I wish more of them were for fun, but a whole lot of those were for work. Um, probably uh, probably 2/3 were, or a half at least, are work related. But I've learned that you have to say please, thank you, and good morning, and say it a lot. So learn it in the local language. So within 24 hours of getting in a country, I try to learn those at minimum, right? And say it a lot. And even though you can't understand anything after that, it's okay. At least they know you're trying. I also tell people that we have to honor my teams. You have to eat whatever you're served, unless it's going to make you sick. You got to push it around and at least make it look eaten, because you can't insult your hosts. And they're being nice and giving you something that you may not want to eat, but you need to look like you can. And of course, show interest and utmost respect for the culture, the local customs, and historical sites. So when the work is done, they bring us places. So that general and 10 Russian captains, when I worked in Russia, they brought us to some amazing places. It's really important that you show up and partake in that. Mm-hmm. And I guess my last bit of advice is don't be afraid to get lost, because I've learned you have to develop a high tolerance for not knowing where you are, because you're constantly getting lost. And if that stresses you, you're not going to like this kind of work, right? You have to just be really tolerant. And so anyways, those are some of my rules of the road. When I was working in Africa, these are sort of typical work conditions. The contracting officer there is that guy in the blue shirt, and he's writing a contract outside the hotel as we're sitting outside, and I'm on my, back then, I think that was a BlackBerry. My God, right? Trying to do major work, right, on the BlackBerry. And that was our translator on the right. So you're constantly working with translators and in bad internet connections and blah blah blah. Right? But you also get to do fun stuff like this, and get to enjoy the sights and see the country and enjoy it. The people that you're working with. This is Namibia, and the team that we have there. This is Burkina Faso. You also see tremendous poverty, right? And this is, you see the peg in the water, and they're washing their clothes and their food and their dishes and doing everything in the same water. And you just shake your head and go, oh my gosh, and this is still their reality. And beautiful places like Democratic Republic of Congo is spectacular, but it's also a very unsettled and politically unrested country, and not so safe always to travel. And this is Ghana, not too far from where the slave castles are on the coast there. And Gabon, very common rough travel and a lot of poverty. But then there's some beautiful spots like Mauritius. Oh my goodness, so you get quite a mixture. And challenging travel, to say the least. It's not always very safe travel conditions, to say the least. And you have to use a lot of judgment and go, no, I'm not getting on that. Sorry, I'm just not going to get on that one. Anyways, that's just sort of what I had, and I wanted to open it up for questions from you all. And I'll stop sharing.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. I know I those, as you were kind of sharing some of the places at the end, I feel like, oh, if only Brad were here, because he would have probably a comment or two about some of the places that you've been. I think he was in Mauritius like 3 weeks ago. He's one of our.
Who was that?
Oh, so he's one of our club members, and he's also one of our. He's our like a founding member of this club, but he runs like a tour. They call tour agency. Right, specializing in coordinating tours for like Rotarians, like that's the target demographic. But yeah, he was just there. I think maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. But yeah, I think you might be giving him a run for his money on how many places you've been. So I think I did have a question. One in relation to some of the sources you were finding. I think at one point, I don't know if you mentioned it. I don't think you mentioned it in this presentation, but I recall you had mentioned pulling like sources from like someone's like tent or like home because it was used like as a heat source. And how, like in those instances, like how would you navigate that and like kind of like the translation? I know you mentioned you had a translator, but like kind of trying to teach people, a little bit more about radiation and like potential dangers, especially like even now, even when knowing the same language, there kind of can be a disconnect with what the people think they know about it and what is actually being communicated, right?
Yeah. Well, you're very dependent on your translators, right? Because if you're not fluent in their language, you're up a creek. But mostly I found people were very grateful when we'd find things and remove them. And they had the sense that they, didn't really understand the danger, but they got that it was dangerous and that we were helping them. And, one of the projects that I was on with the UN was the international symbol for radiation is the trefoil. And we developed a new symbol for warning people about dangerous sources. And we tested it around the world. And most people don't have a clue what the trefoil means. They don't have any idea. And so we needed a symbol that would work for the illiterate. And we ended up with a symbol that of a person running a death skull and rays coming down and then running away. And that symbol is red, and it's to be placed on very large sources as an indication of a danger to people. And so anyways, it's a constant challenge to communicate with people on a topic that they mostly don't know about. But they, on the whole, I can say they're grateful when you do your best and they understand you're trying to help them.
My understanding is the X-ray machines require electricity to operate, right?
Yeah.
So how is that navigated in poorer countries that have unreliable energy sources?
Yeah, good question, Will. It's a total dilemma. So when you have intermittent power supplies, to come in with an X-ray machine, so we buy backup generators. And when we supply the X-ray machine, we supply all these backup generators to help, because that's exactly right. In Africa, so many of the countries don't have dependable electricity, or frequently the grid goes out. I'm hoping that's improving. There's been a lot of effort to improve it, but it's a real dilemma. That was the nice thing about the cesium sources. They were on all the time, and you didn't have to have electricity. Right? Mm-hmm. But when we took those away, then we had to present other solutions.
I guess, I know, Carolyn, it's health physicists, and that all was a very male-dominated field. So kind of how did you get into that field, and like what have you seen like an increase in women in the field?
Well, you're exactly right. There's few women in the field. When I became board certified in what year was it? 1978, I think it was. No, excuse me. It was after my daughter. So Yeah, it was 78. When I got board certified in 78, I was the 20th woman to be board certified in the US. There were very few. Now there's about 178. Okay, so we've made progress, but not a lot of progress, is the fact of the matter. And, Dan's a board certified health physicist. You know this, Dan. There's about 1,200 in the US, 1,300 or so. And again, the number of women are very small. So it's a very male dominated field. And what I always tell people is that the good news is you're in demand if you're a woman in this field and board certified. But the bad news is you're in demand because everybody wants you on your token committee or whatever. So yes, it is a challenge, and you do have to prove yourself. I found that in particular when working with the Russian military. I mean, they didn't take a woman working with them very easily, and but you earn their respect, and it worked out fine. But you had to earn it; it wasn't just given to you.
Mm.
The challenges.
It's really nice to see all those pictures. I've heard the stories. It's fun to actually start putting pictures to them. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Share some of them. And Frank came on board, and I didn't get to meet Frank. Frank, what do you do?
I join Zoom calls whenever I can.
Okay.
That's it.
Frank also competes with Will for comedian of the club.
Will has it, hands down.
But he's also our incoming president for the year. So that's who I'll be passing the baton to.
Great.
We're in good hands. We really are.
Yeah. Do you live and work in Oakland, Frank?
Yes, I do.
And Carolyn, so curiosity, how did you get into the field? Like, what kind of led you to that?
Well, I fell into it. I did not purposely go out to be a health physicist. And just like you guys probably, you didn't mean to necessarily do this, but you fall into it. I needed a job out of college, right? And got a job at a cyclotron. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'll get something else as soon as I can, because this had awful hours, and it was, working in this lab and taking a dose with 12 boxes and blah, blah, blah. And I ended up liking it and found it interesting. And decided to go back and get my graduate degree in biophysics. And so you fall into things. I didn't plan to do this. But the work was interesting, and like I say, it sort of attracted me and followed me. So, not too many people go, "Oh, I want to be a health physicist." I have a clue what this is, right?
Unless you're Dan, right?
No, even then, people still are like, what is a health physicist? That doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
Too funny.
Mm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions about the presentation? Just I guess kind of my last one is like, what's next? I know you mentioned you're doing consulting work, but I think you're part of another committee. You're president-elect for a committee, right?
The president-elect of the American Academy of Health Physics. So I'm just trying to give back a little and support. It's the Board Accreditation Academy that certifies health physicists, and so I'm helping them, and I'm recruiting people into the profession, and helping support that they get accredited, and so yeah, it's a nice thing to do when you have more time, right? To give back a little bit more, just like you guys are doing. You're giving back where you can, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to focus on.
Awesome. Well, it's so good to hear from you and just kind of even get a more in-depth story, like Dan had mentioned. Like, I know we heard some of the stories before, but to really see it like in context and just the scale of like what you were doing and just the uniqueness of the role. And I think you also learned a lot right now about kind of your role too and just what you were doing, since we didn't get a chance to work in proximity together. So as a thank you, Carolyn, for coming to speak to our club, we are donating some vaccines in your name, polio vaccines, because within Rotary, it's been a part of our mission since close to like our inception. And it's endemic in only, I think, Afghanistan and Pakistan at this point. I think Frank, you had mentioned to me last time that there might have been some other cases on the rise in other locations, but we appreciate your time and hope we can do some good work in your name.
Well, thank you. I love the idea that you're donating vaccines. My Kenya friends in Masamara in Kenya on the game reserve still haven't gotten their vaccines. You know, I talk to them every so often and they say, no vaccines here in Kenya. You know, you lose perspective. Here we've had our vaccines and we're boosted and all this, and they haven't had anything. So there's work to be done. Thank you for doing it.